my forte. Good morning, everyone. Andrew Smith, very happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel. It's really an honor to be here with some of these distinguished visitors that we have and some good friends. And as I look around the audience, it's nice to see so many familiar faces from the neighborhood, Don Garza among all the others that are here. It's really nice to have you folks here. Thank you for coming out. The Safer Cities Initiative, obviously I'm a huge fan of the Safer Cities Initiative, and it's not just the cops, and it's not just the cops out there trying to arrest our way out of homelessness. We recognized when we first started that, rounding up the 2,000 or so people that were sleeping on the streets of Skid Row and putting them all in jail for vagrancy wasn't going to work. So obviously we needed a partnership with a bunch more people just besides the police department. And if you'll indulge me for just a second, I want to thank a couple people because I'll forget if I don't. City Attorney Rocky Delgadillo and his dream team of attorneys that helped us throughout this whole thing and are still there. Songhai Mahmoud Armstead, who's in the back from the City Attorney's office. Jose Gravidi, who was here as our friend and helped us throughout the entire process. Carolyn Phillips, Jeff Isaacs, folks in the Mayor's office, Gil Cedillo's folks. There's so many people. Our partner Andy Bales from the Union Rescue Mission. So many people did so much to help Skid Row and to help us with this transformation of Skid Row. First of all, though, I think if you could throw that next slide up there. There's the man, Dr. George Kelling. He's the one who was Chief Bratton's mentor, I guess, Chief Bratton's confidant, Chief Bratton's kind of philosophic guide through this whole thing. And Chief Bratton was described by Joe Dominic in next month's Playboy magazine, and I did read the article, not just the pictures. He was described, Chief Bratton, as not only the country's most famous police chief, but also the most influential crime fighter in recent history. And that's a description of Chief Bratton by Joe Dominic. I've always described him as kind of like the father of modern policing. And if you think of him as the father of modern policing, I think of Dr. Kelling and Dr. Wilson as maybe the godfathers of modern policing. Because the way that they formulated this broken windows concept is really kind of the way our department has changed over the past years, and we really are moving in that direction. You kind of know how we got here, you kind of know how we got to Skid Row. Let me just take a minute to paint a picture of the chaos that is, or that one time was Skid Row. If you throw the next slide, this is an encampment on Industrial Street, and that is typical of what we saw for decades on the Skid Row area. As a young policeman from Iron Mountain, Michigan, when I first came down and took a look at Skid Row, I said, holy smokes, what are we doing here? Look at this, look at how people are living just a couple blocks away from City Hall in downtown Los Angeles. And the kind of human behavior that we saw in those encampments was just, it was mind-boggling. The sexual assaults that you see, 3,800 parolees that lived in the area were preying on the people that were out there. The mentally ill were sometimes so disturbed that they couldn't even report that they'd been the victims of a crime. Elderly women, senior citizen women sexually assaulted in those tents, come to Andy Bales at the Mission with broken ribs. Just horrible, horrible situation, and in some place that people really is improper or impossible to believe. I'll give you two little quick stories, and I apologize for ruining your appetite, but these are two stories, anecdotes that tell you about the kind of inhuman and unhuman behavior that we'd see on Skid Row. One was told by my classmate the other day. He said he was working on Skid Row as a police officer in the 90s, and a little campfire like this happened all the time. Every night there were 20 or 30 of them around. At this particular one of the folks at the campfire had captured and killed one of the neighborhood dogs, had skinned it, put it on a spit, and was preparing to eat it when my partner came along and saw it. While at Andy Bales Mission, you can eat three times a day for free. It's just that if you allow folks to live in encampments such as that, they'll engage in behavior that is not human. Another time, I personally was driving just south of Skid Row, and I came across a guy with a shopping cart. In that shopping cart was a severed horse's head, which investigation showed that he had taken from a rendering plant, which is just south of Skid Row over outside of the city limits. Parenthetically, I used to work there in an off-duty job, making sure that homeless folks didn't jump over the fence and go into the pit. For those who don't know what a rendering plant is, it's where they throw the carcasses of dead circus animals and zoo animals, and the meat that gets expired at Vons and Ralph's and whatnot gets thrown in there. Homeless folks would jump into there, grab the green hams, cut off the bad part, and turn around and sell it, or turn around and eat it. This particular individual had a horse's head that he recovered from one of those bins, and was pushing on a shopping cart. I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm taking this home, or I'm taking this to my camp under the 6th Street Bridge." I said, "What are you going to do with it?" He goes, "I'm going to eat it." So here, that's the kind of behavior that we saw. Not only behavior about humans on each other, but just behavior that's just not what we'd expect out of a 21st century city of Los Angeles. I'll throw you a couple quick views of some of these encampments, because I'll talk all day if you let me. I only have 7 minutes. I'm down about 6, right? Real quickly, the encampments that you'd see, obviously a guy with a wheelchair can't get through there. You throw the next one on. Again, more encampments, just all throughout the whole downtown Skid Row area we saw encampments such as this. The best of intentions, the city or the folks put out about 25 outhouses. Those were featured in the LA Times. You remember some of the articles by Steve Lopez that talked about how they became houses of prostitution, how they became shooting galleries, how gang members would take over and charge people $1 to shoot up or $2 to go in there and have sex with a prostitute on Skid Row. Unbelievable, but I personally saw 3 guys coming out of an outhouse with 1 woman at the same time. I can't even imagine what was going on there. But this is what would typically happen. The outhouses would be occupied by someone who took it over as a residence, and the people would use the side of the outhouse as a restroom. So we ended up getting rid of those as part of our cleanup plan. These photos, and I'll just flip through the next 3 or so, those are photos of open-air drug use taken by one of the businesses over there. A guy, I believe he owns a shrimp company. He would just take pictures out of his window of folks smoking crack and shooting up heroin. We got one videotape footage of some 5 people shooting up heroin using the same needle. You know, in this day and age, the same needle, fill up with heroin, shoot it up, fill up the next guy, shoot him up, right around a little circle of heroin use. Just absolutely horrific. Again, open-air drug dealing, broad daylight, just across the street from one of the fish processors down there. This is Industrial Street, as you can imagine. You can see, obviously, the sidewalk is completely covered by these encampments. Home of murders, home of people hiding from the law, a great place if you're a fugitive from justice. Nobody has ID. You can say whoever you are and pretend to be someone else. And we catch murderers from Texas, and we catch sexual assault suspects from all over the country that come down here to hide amongst the Skid Row population. Click on the next one, I guess. Oh, by the way, all these photos and stuff, it's going to be on our website. So if I go too fast or you need to see the rest of it, it'll be on our website. Remember this picture. This is the one I showed you a little earlier from Industrial Street. After the Safer Cities Initiative was gone for about 6 months, the next one will show you. This is what it looked like 6 months afterwards. The encampments were gone. A lot of the folks had moved on to other things. Next slide. How am I doing? Great. There's 3 prongs to Safer Cities. Again, it's not just about enforcement. There's 2 other prongs to it. You know, the enforcement is obviously, next slide, please. Enforcement, obviously, what we wanted to do was remove the criminal element. Those criminal predators, those drug dealers, those people who were there to prey on the homeless, the gang members that were blood gang members up on Main Street that were selling dope and making their living on the addiction, unfortunately, of some of the folks that lived down there. We wanted to remove them so we could deal with the population that we had. The next step was the outreach. Go out with the folks like Andy Bales, the folks from our SOS program, and try and get these folks out of these tents and out of these encampments and into some type of program or into some type of better life. The folks from SRO Housing were tremendous, and Anita Nelson's here helped us out with providing shelter, providing beds, and providing housing for folks. The last part of it was enhancement. We needed to work with the mayor's office, City Council Wizar, Jan Perry's office, to get the darkened streets lighted again. What would happen is, A, the gang members would shoot out the street lights, B, the transients or the homeless folks that didn't have any money would pull the wiring out to go sell the copper for scrap. So there were hundreds of lights that weren't working. Well, if you add 2,000 people to downtown Skid Row area and hundreds of lights aren't working, at nighttime it's just a free-for-all. It is they called it Mardi Gras and crack, but it was a dark, dangerous, scary place for anybody to be. A couple slides. I won't bore you with the type of felonies and narcotics arrests that we made. Next slide, please. Next slide. Violent crime obviously plummeted. We can talk about that all day if you want, because I love talking about crime. But violent crime, 2005, 2006, 2007. That's where all was central, but the bulk of our violent crime was in the Skid Row area. Same with the property crime, obviously. This is our 10th count of people sleeping on the streets. We did that periodically every 2 weeks for a while there. You can see the very first one was when we first started our Safer Cities Initiative on the 18th of September 2006. 1,876 people were sleeping on the street that night. As of the 4th of this month,